me put a title here. Just a second, we're gonna get going. Stay. Episode 18. Here we go. All right. All right, Stay Wild Child. I think we're almost live. Just a second here. Let me just make sure I've got everything going right. Make sure this populates, because one time I did not do it live. And that was not good. So, hey, all right, it says we're live. So, hey, Stay Wild Child. It is Nicole, and this is episode 18 of our Stay Wild Child. I was trying to think of a good name for that, and hopefully during this little downtime, I'll come up with something super creative. But I'm excited today. Sam Ditka has decided to join me on this episode number 18. And Sam and I have known each other almost a decade now.
Yep.
And yeah, almost a decade. And it's interesting. We have not spent a lot of time like in each other's like physical company. So we've done a lot of social distancing, but we've just really become great friends through the power of this. I think it's a beautiful tool, social media. And I think especially now, while we're in this social distancing practice, I think it's even more important to really stay connected with people and people who inspire you, people who are just really authentic and living just a really badass life. And so that's exactly what I think about Miss Sam Ditka. So welcome, Sam.
Thank you for having me, Nicole. It took us a minute here to find a good date for the two of us, but I'm very happy to be here today. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, okay. So I always start off our episodes with, and I got to change that name. I don't like the word episode. But I always start off with asking kind of a question around our group is helping women remember who they are before the world told them who they were supposed to be. Mm-hmm. I think so often we can get trapped in, well, and especially, I mean, gosh, at this moment right now where the norm of society is kind of like, kind of falling down. And so, which, is probably a great time for women to really be checking in with, who they truly are. But I've watched your evolution and you're very similar to me. You consider yourself a Jane of all trades, which I like because I kind of consider myself exactly the same. But go back to kind of where you were before you started this midlife becoming. And I love to watch you shine. So talk just a little bit about, kind of your progression, if you will.
Well, I grew up in the 80s, and when I was getting ready to go off to college, I had really big aspirations on what I wanted to do and who I wanted to be. But it was not a time that, even though I had grown up on Mary Tyler Moore and Rhoda and all these great feminist icons, it was still more appropriate for a woman to just have success in the existing world. And the idea of entrepreneurship it certainly, I mean, there was no internet, so there was no blog. But even women getting into media, you did it this one way, and that was it. And so I had these crazy ideas about creating a community for people around me that would have inspiration. It could have fashion. It could have a little bit of like faith and politics mixed in, just with a really, really strong core and belief system. And because it was the 80s and that was a job that didn't exist, I started to really buy into the idea that I needed that like regular 9 to 5 with 2 paid weeks vacation kind of job, and shifted gears dramatically out of fear that I couldn't possibly make it happen because it was something that didn't really exist at the time. So I worked in banking for a number of years, which killed my soul a little bit every day. And then I worked for Hallmark Cards, which was a tremendous company to work for, has always been one of the best companies for working moms. But they restructured when I was pregnant with my second child. And so I took the buyout and stayed home. And that was a lot of change, being home with the kids full time, even though it was something I very much wanted. Any of us who've done that knows that you start to be like, all right, well, who am I in all of this anymore?
Right.
And,
Right.
found the direct sales genre with a couple of different companies and met these great women who all of a sudden were like, I'm going to go out and I'm going to try to create my own business with this infrastructure there as safety net. And after about 12 years of doing that and always having that safety net there, I thought, I don't need the safety net anymore. And I realized that so much of my message was to empower women into their own confidence, to try out something new, to be something, to not wait until our kids are grown, to own ourselves again, or still in some cases, it maybe they never have really owned who they were. My siblings are significantly older than I am, and my parents were just a lot more traditional. My mom always stayed at home. And so the idea, it's not that my parents didn't give me ambition, but it was like ambition to a point. It was ambition to like go to college and get the job and then have the kids and stay home and raise them. And that was the box.
Sure. Yeah.
And, just so many of the messages out there kind of muddied those waters until I got frankly old enough to say, there is more to this. With the advent of the internet and blogging and everything else, people were saying, you have great messages, you should be putting them out there. And so in 2017, I took the plunge and here I am.
So good. So good. So I love that because it's the mom who still has the corporate job, right? And she's working, right? Well, her kids are, in the home. There's that tremendous amount of guilt that we carry in that arena, or the mom who stays home and takes care of her kids, and then she kind of loses her identity. And so you are there basically as Moxie Mama, as the voice to help people still stay in their identity and still stay in their just own who they are, right? And not get into the society pressures of all the magazines and all the articles that tell you they put so much pressure on what and who you should be, and just always like reminding people to come back. Is that kind of the message that Moxie Mama is?
Absolutely. So Moxie is defined as like a force of nature. And it's an old school word that, it's probably late 1800s, early 1900s. And, oh, she's got moxie, and it maybe wasn't always a compliment. It was someone who was a little out of the box, didn't really take no for an answer. And over the years, I just found myself more and more inclined towards that idea of, and I have a sister who was very, very involved with women's rights and things like that. And I always felt that equality doesn't have to be the same. It's, feminism for women should be the freedom to choose. Like, I am choosing that I wanted to be home with my kids, but I also wanted to have a career. What is so exhausting to me, and you and I have talked about this many, many times, is, the stay-at-home moms bully the working moms. The working moms bully the stay-at-home moms. The direct sellers get a bad rep because they're trying to create a business of their own. And, the working people don't treat them as seriously. And again, the stay-at-home moms are like, why does she need more? Like Rodney King, can't we just all get along and say, this is what it's for? If this is your jam, go for it. I don't have to join whatever that is with you. I don't have to go to work in corporate America. I don't have to stay home with my kids and bake cookies 24/7, but I will support your decision to do that and the fact that it works in your family, because that to me is what true feminism is. And
100%.
that is the message at Moxie Mama. Like, whatever it is that's going to look like, do it 110%. And I am there for you. And, we got each other's back.
Yes, girl. I love it. Ooh, I love that message. Absolutely. it's simply, feminism is simply championing, and I never can say this word correctly, championing other women, right?
Yes.
It's just celebrating who we are, and not pitting each other against each other, whatever role you decide that you're going to take moving forward. It's just celebrating each other, because we're all so unique, and we all have these different passions, and you and I, we met in a business that was a total
Mess.
mess. Yeah. So we met, we met in a really unfortunate business that really, I don't know, I think it threw many of us for a loop, but I have developed so many incredible relationships out of that business. So definitely there was a reason for it. And
Absolutely.
and then for us to be able to, the majority of us, even after that mess went away, and we weren't a part of that business any longer, we all still had, a lot of us all had this real connection with one another. And it seemed like so many of us, I just kind of think back about like Rashmi and Ken and you and Emily. And I mean, there were so many who were Jade and Amy. And, there were so many who are still like, that just kind of sparked that fire in us to say, okay, so if we can get through this, then we can do something different. And I know each of us kind of took a little bit of a different direction, but all very similar. And I love the way that we've all remained in this place of celebrating one another, right?
Yes. And it's really the biggest mistake that we women make, is not doing that. And I think that in an effort to be treated as equals, that is our Achilles heel, is not supporting one another. Because if I don't support you, why should any man in my circle support either of us? There's no camaraderie. Obviously it's not everybody, but
Right.
I think that very often, that when women do not support one another in that way, and then, but you expect men in your business or whatever to also support that, well, why should they? If there's infighting in what you're already doing, they want to stay away from the drama of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's just trying to kind of clear up that message and be there, and be willing to have discussions also without it being totally personal all the time, to say, hey, I love what you're doing. It's not really my jam, in a respectful way. I support you. And then being okay with not everyone loving who you are also.
Yeah. Right. Yes. Yeah. It's, I've found myself, during this time of the social distancing, I try to take a pretty positive, love, light oriented stance. And, there's definitely times where that fear creeps in. We were talking right before this, began today. And, I had to practice a lot of awareness today. I had to, put on a positive playlist that I have. I had to dance around. I really had to practice a lot of the things that help kind of shift my mindset. However, I look at myself on Facebook sometimes, and the message that I'm putting out, this message of positivity, which I know helps a lot of people, but I can still fall into judgment of myself. Like, okay, am I being too, happy and positive, right, all the time? I mean, I do try to let that realness show. However, it's that, I think it's, for me, it's been years of practicing at going in and healing that judgment aspect that I can still have of myself. And I know for so many women that, constantly feeling judged. And I think it's just simply because there's so many messages out there where the messages Well, I mean, I guess the guys, they have some of those same messages, right? If they're not the hunter gatherer, or if they're not the, the money maker, the monetary guy, I'm sure they deal with some of the same things. We just tend to, or at least maybe I'm just talking for myself. I tend to internalize it a little bit more. So it's even, during this time where, it's like, okay, is it too much? Is it not? I find myself always in question. I don't know if you feel that way too.
I have pretty significant imposter syndrome. And I think that what you're describing kind of falls into that area. It's like, okay, well, there's this perception that I am a quote unquote expert on something. And that's why I like saying I'm a Jane of all trades, because not,
Yeah.
If I am talking to my audience about something even quasi medical, there's like a big, not, that this is the research that I have done.
Right.
But even when it comes to the stuff that I do really trust my own judgment, there's still this questioning of, did I say the right thing? Did I do the right thing? And a lot of that, it does come from what the media ideal of what we're supposed to do and be is. And I think that, you and I are alike in that we want to be careful. Yes, we want everything we put out there to be quality information and positivity. But I think in also admitting, and I've seen you do this, saying that there are days, there's imposter syndrome, there's tons of self-doubt, there's, I've had a very difficult time right now with everything going on with the virus. A lot of what I do, as you know, Nicole, is like talking about what are the current spring trends. Well, the current spring trend right now is leggings and a pajama shirt. So, what am I going to do? Here are my pajamas for today. It is inauthentic for me to pretend that what we're all going through is something different. So I've had to pivot like really hard, but it's also then been really hard for me to just even get any momentum at all. I'm referring to it now as, let's see if I can get it right, because it's a made up word, my coronavation. Like something in this, because I feel like I want to deliver great content. I want to be helpful to the community at large. I want all of us who are like, oh my God, my husband's working at home now and I'm going to lose my mind. That's the reality, but I don't know what to say, because right now I don't have an answer. So I think sometimes saying I don't have an answer is actually the best answer.
It is.
Also, to say today I have no answers, and that's really, I think there's so much, I think there's a lot of great growth that's going to come out of this, but right now we are in the trenches, and oh, by the way, facing like 32 more days of it. So when it was like 2 weeks, we were like, okay, I got this, and reality is really setting in.
It is. And I know you have, sons that are the same age as mine, maybe just a little bit younger. But so how is that happening? How's that going on, that are they both home?
They're both home.
And your
My
adopted
college son was moved out. Yes.
Mhm.
So he's home, and actually he goes to University of Pittsburgh, and I was very happy. They went in early and decided early to just yank everybody out, send them home, clean out your rooms. Part of it is because their semester ends in April anyway. So it wasn't, they looked at it, if we're not going back till after Easter anyway, let's just not bother. So they've had a plan in place. My other son is a junior in high school. And it's hard kind of emotionally for my college son, because he misses his friends, he misses the independence, but he's probably adjusting a little better to it. The younger one, he's a spring athlete. This would be prime recruiting as a junior. He's going to miss his SATs. They're not doing the ACTs. We're going to be taking those tests in the summer now. It has changed. It's not like you got a vacation in March and April. Everything's on lockdown. And so there's a lot of work that didn't happen during this time that's getting pushed into the summer, and a lot of opportunities that have changed dramatically because, as we are talking potentially to some coaches and things like that, they're like, well, let's wait and see if you have a club season. Since you don't have your varsity high school season, let's wait and see if you have your club season. What if they don't have that? So what does that landscape look like? So I think he is a little more anxiety about what's the domino effect of this than
Right.
the freshmen in college who'd kind of already made that transition. So I feel very, very much for juniors and seniors in high school and seniors in college, because I think that there's just so much ish that came up with this additional to just get your work done. And yes, we're in quarantine and then we'll get back to normal life. I think they're feeling like there's going to be rebound pain from this in planning their futures.
Yeah.
It's hard. And it's hard to, my high school son is also kind of that extrovert on steroids. I know you know the type.
Yeah.
And trying to help him through this as well. He's doing a lot of cooking and things like that. We have given him the opportunity, like his one best friend, they can go to the park, they can walk 6 feet apart from each other, and they can like run and catch Pokemon and talk and whatever for like an hour outside, 6 feet apart. You know, that's it. But that's not, I know that's not enough for me. And so it's hard, and I'm trying very hard to be understanding of how scary that all must feel.
Yeah, especially when
Um,
they felt like their lives were going in a certain direction. I have nieces. One's a junior in high school, and then the other one's in sixth grade, so she's cool with it. But but
yeah,
the junior in high school, yeah, everything's shifted for her. They just announced that they probably won't go back to school this year, and so she's, they're doing it homeschooled.
right.
But they had a junior. She's in a small school, so the junior prom was canceled, and she was on that committee. And yeah, so it's a lot of challenges for our youth during this time. And I think it's really just having those conversations. I know that Kathy was on with us last week, and she is she does conscious parenting, and so it was just really just having these open conversations with your kids. And it's it is a good learning time for all of us that we don't have control at this particular moment, yet it doesn't make any of it any easier whatsoever. So yeah, I can imagine.
I think it's unfortunate, a lot of parents of seniors, let me start over again. Lots of parents of seniors are frustrated for their kids, and they're sad for their kids, and they're, talking about trying to help their seniors through it. But I saw there's so many memes, that are flying around. And I saw one that really gave me a lot of pause, because for me, probably for you, the closest I have ever come to feeling like we feel right now was 9/11.
Right.
It's like that day the earth stood still. And
Yep.
I think that's part of what's kind of giving me my own personal anxiety in this is that feeling lasted a couple of weeks, and then we got back to normal, the new
We did.
normal. But businesses reopened again. I mean, everything was shut down for like a week or so, but then TSA changed, but nothing really changed. We got back to it. This again, the idea that this is going to be 4-6 weeks of the earth standing still is really intimidating. So this meme that I saw that several senior parents put out there was, to the class of 2020, you were born at 9/11 and you're coming of age in a global pandemic, and how, you guys can accomplish anything. And I actually took pause for a moment. I'm like, that's an awful lot of pressure. They might have been born during 9/11, but they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
They
Right.
don't know what that felt like. The real terror of is anyone who's any spiritual story has an apocalypse, right? And are there people thinking that way? Are they that scared? And it felt like an awful lot of pressure on these kids to just be okay with it, to say, oh, well, we must be really tough and we're going to be okay with it. And I think it's important that we not dismiss, yes, we want to be positive about it and kind of, but we have to move through the pain to get to that point.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah, you got to have the conversations, and they have to be able to express their feelings. I remember, during that time, I think Lane was 3, maybe 4. And, the big thing was because you had the news running all the time in your house. Because
that's when I learned to turn the news off.
Yeah, actually, I did too.
And you and I both are like that, like turn it off, Yeah.
We tune in just for a little bit every day now. We actually listen to the live streaming options. We don't have the news on at all in our home. But yeah, I remember, it was like, because you had your little, my little toddler, sitting there in front of the TV, and that was the moment for me. It was like, oh, right, this isn't a good idea. He doesn't need to be paying attention to all this. But back then, it just wasn't. Yeah, I did. I learned to turn the news off. You're absolutely right. Yeah. What a good realization.
Yeah, that was the one that did it to me. I had been through, honestly, Princess Diana dying. I sat and watched the loops for days and I couldn't get away from it. And then, leading up to Y2K, we were all like, oh my God, is the world going to end? I mean, and Princess Diana, world ending, I get it. But, follow with me.
Oh yeah, I was right there with Princess Diana.
Right. Then we got to 9/11 and like Connor was 8 months old and I had not yet taken him to daycare that morning. And so I called and I'm like, he's not coming. And I sat in front of the television with him on my lap and just tears pouring onto the top of his head for hours. And I couldn't turn it off. I couldn't turn it off. And it took me, I think, 3 or 4 days. And I finally was like, this is so unhealthy for me. It's so unhealthy for me. And fortunately, there's a great, I don't know if you've ever gotten the Skim. It's an email newsletter and they do like a roundup and they'll do like a sentence about the biggest news stories. And then they'll hyperlink the bigger story for you to go to. It's very balanced, very impartial. And you can choose to dive deeper into a particular subject. So it's set up kind of like you get a blog newsletter in your inbox. And that is kind of where I go. And they'll have pieces from lots of different news sources so that you can kind of keep up on everything without all the people just yelling at each other in the screens all the time.
Right, exactly. Yeah. That's a much better.
It's been
SKIM.
SKIMM.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's just been like a better way for me to protect my energy also.
Yeah.
I'm a fairly empathetic person. I wouldn't say full empath. I haven't studied it enough, but I start to take on all of those anxieties and stressors. And so it's just healthier for me if I'm going to be good to everybody else to kind of keep that boundary.
Absolutely.
Which is the hardest thing in the world.
Yeah. I'm in charge of that at my home as well. So making sure that we all stay, in a good space. So yeah, that's my role as well. So okay, so let's divert just a little bit.
Yep.
So are you tell me about this? Are you doing this serial killer podcast? Did you decide to move forward in that?
So I have the podcast.
Okay.
And I've had conversations about serial killer stuff, but it's not a true crime podcast.
Right. Okay.
So the podcast is called Meant for Moxie, and it's a companion to the blog. And I interview, the way I put it is I'm interviewing everyday people who've done extraordinary things.
Oh.
They're not really everyday people because I don't think that a person who survives being an attempted murder by Ted Bundy is an everyday person. That's not an everyday person.
Right.
Right. But the conversation is like two buds. And that's the idea. So I have interviewed a couple of New York Times bestselling authors, a accredited and awarded filmmaker. The two women who were involved in a huge Netflix true crime cold case docuseries called The Keepers, and a humor blogger, but she's also now written a bunch of books. She's also a New York Times bestselling author. Just a lot of different people. I have ones coming up with a fashion designer from here in Pittsburgh. I'm finishing editing that. But also I have an episode I recorded late last week with a psychic.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So it's not, yes, I've talked to, some of the episodes have had a true crime bent to them because I love that. But it was kind of making that fit into still this idea of how we overcome and thrive in spite of, because of, or in spite of, excuse me, I have to let my dog out. I have a door closed and he's like, what's going on downstairs? I want to go check it out. They're thrival stories. And, that's kind of a made up term, but the idea of a thrival story is not only surviving something, but then finding the lesson in it, turning it back around and making it into something really great.
Sure.
And, so the woman who survived an attack by Ted Bundy, like how has that changed her life? What are the lessons she took from that? One friend of mine, is a college buddy who worked on Wall Street and was addicted to cocaine and lost everything in the 2008 crash. And he wrote his memoir, and it is one of the most powerful things I've ever read in my life, hearing his story of how he just overcame all of that and the lessons to be learned in that. And again, this idea that we all have that power to do that. To find our own thrival stories. And that's more of what it is. But I do love me some serial killers and true crime stuff. So when and where I can find those people, I try to work them in.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Very good. Very good. All right. And so, okay, let's talk about, are you, I guess at this moment, because you mentioned this already. So the spring trend is definitely the pajama wear right now, or the leggings, the workout attire.
Right. Everybody's reporting lots of sales of tops.
Yeah.
We're all,
Yeah, I definitely could have had pajama pants on today.
Right.
I chose to throw a pair of jeans on, but I definitely could have not. I'm barefoot. Yeah. So I know that you'll get back to that. So I love the whole midlife becoming. It's so interesting the way that we kind of let go of these perceived fears and we step into our own power, and I think some of the judgment of the outside world starts to flip away, and we just start to get a little bit braver if we choose to step into that, right? If we choose to step into that direction. So one of my favorite, I think this was this a year ago or 2 years ago when you joined the band? How long ago was that?
Well, that actually preceded the blog. So,
okay. It was? I'm so bad with time. Okay.
Yeah. No, that's okay. So, because the blog probably wouldn't have happened without that. So, in 2016, my younger son, the one who's like me, in many ways, he was at School of Rock here in Pittsburgh. And he had been trying to get me. He's like, Mom, the teachers, the parents, they have this band, they need a vocalist. I was like, blah, 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 whatever. And I wouldn't do it. I was terrified. I was like, who am I? Middle-aged lady. No, I'm not doing that. And he pretty much like triple dogged me one night. And I went, and the guys in the band were like, we were wondering if you were ever going to show up. Timmy's been talking about you. So I said, all right, guys, if I can stay the full 2 hours and not puke from anxiety, I'll come back next week. But I'm not singing. And they were like, okay. But what do you want to sing? And I was like, Jefferson Airplane, White Rabbit. They were like, okay. So I just take a call in the middle of the rehearsal. I walk out of the building. I come back in. They've learned it. And they hand me the microphone. And that was the proverbial ripping off of the Band-Aid. And I can still picture it. Like, I finished singing. I was, they were all behind me, thank God. And I sing, and it gets really quiet at the end of it. And I'm like, good, did it suck? Like, what? Nobody's saying anything. And they were like, what the hell? Like, where have you been? And I was like, I just, it's fear. It's fear. So did that. We performed a bunch of times, Hard Rock Cafe, this other like local concert venue. But that was really part of, so that was June of 2016, the first time I performed there. And the blog was launched in March of 2017. So that was sort of like that, that rapid advancement that I was like, all right,
Absolutely.
if I could do that, I could do this.
Of course.
And it's like, there's just one more thing, like, let's do it. And I had a lot of those signs from the universe between those two times. It was like, in my willingness to put myself out there, all of these things started floating in my environment. People I was meeting, conversations that I was having, also connected to the company where you and I met. My friend Catherine Keller was like, why don't you have a blog? And I was like, you've been telling me that for years. She's like, and all of these things just kept coming up. And I was like, okay, I get it. Let's do this.
I'm listening.
Yes, I'm finally listening. And yeah, so.
It's when you step into that creation, right? Mm-hmm. It's when you allow those inhibitions, even though there's a lot of fear wrapped up in it. But I've found even with the aerial stuff that I do, and I totally, like, you are my inspiration. So I know that you sang in college, and or high school, college or high school? High school. Okay. So I didn't take choir. And so see, that's a little fear track running in my background. Like, Sam did take it in high school, so she's a lot more prepared than I am. Yeah. But, I would love to, and I have a decent voice. It's not great, but if I practiced at it, it could get a lot better. Right. And so you're always my inspiration of, like, okay, so I'm 49. Before I'm 50, I'm stepping up on that damn stage with my husband, because my husband's in a band. Yes. So even if it's just one freaking song, I'm doing it because it's like you have to take those steps forward, because once you start to take those steps forward, everything else just kind of starts to open up. I've found it's that creation, it's that play, it's that energy, and it just causes this movement forward. I honestly, when we started talking about that, I had no idea that was pre-blog.
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
Yes. And obviously it was a big topic at the beginning of the blog, because it was that thing that pushed me forward. I actually did, I sang at my Jubilee birthday party last month.
You did?
I did. We took a speaker.
What'd you sing?
Dusty Springfield, Son of a Preacher Man.
Yes, I love that song.
So a friend of mine brought his guitar. Lots of meaning to our family and friends with that song. It was very important to my late sister-in-law. And we thought that would be a great way to kind of bring her in to the event, because it was also a fundraiser for the foundation that we're launching in her name. So, it was a great way to feel like she was there with us at least a little bit. So.
Sure. Let's end on that. Let's talk just a little bit about the foundation that you're putting together. Do you mind just a little bit about your sister? I don't want to stir up any emotions.
I would be happy to.
Okay.
So my husband's sister passed away unexpectedly at age 55 in October of 2018. And even in different parts of the country, Nicole, people might be aware of her if they read anything about the huge child abuse scandal at Penn State University with Jerry Sandusky. So Laura had worked for our county in the prosecution of child abusers for decades, and was recruited to go to the Attorney General's office. And she prosecuted the case against the administration of Penn State, who kind of covered up. that Sandusky was abusing these kids and allowed it to happen, and got guilty verdicts on all of them. So she, she made national news, and she was a very powerful advocate for our society's most vulnerable, women in vulnerable situations and children, abuse survivors, assault victims, things like that. She spent her whole career doing that. Frankly, often I think sacrificing her own personal care to do for others. She raised a daughter totally on her own. She adopted her daughter from China in 2000. So she was a single mom. She took care of everybody. She mothered absolutely everybody. When she passed, in speaking of her at the funeral, there were over 1,000 people at her funeral. And I eulogized her and I said, it's going to take every one of us in this room to fill that void. And so her friends and family came together and said, we really need to take that seriously and find some kind of purpose to this. And so out of this great tragedy, we have established the Laura Ditka Memorial Foundation, which is held in the Berrien Fund in the state of Michigan. And we are launching this to raise funds that we can then grant back to organizations that matter to her. One of the things, and I will use this as a little sidebar, we've talked earlier about like holding boundaries and things like that. I think that people very often say yes to too much. And so we were immediately approached by this charity and that charity, and she was on the board here and volunteered at that. And what we recognized is the best way to serve all of them was to serve none of them directly, and to create our own organization where we could focus our efforts, and then all of those organizations could come to us and apply for grants and things like that. Because it would have pulled, there's no way I could sit on 5 boards. My husband could sit on 5 boards. And so it would be, I was here, he was here, her mom was here. And in bringing everybody together and protecting that boundary and saying, we really need to make it about her, and the things that she loved. And she had that kind of life and legacy that will continue to bring people together. And she still has a tremendous presence in our everyday lives. It's been a very horrible, but very powerfully beautiful experience. And I'm so grateful for having had her in my life for, nearly 30 years.
Right. Yeah. What a beautiful way to remember her, and just always keep her in your life. I think that's a great idea. You're absolutely right. I've been on a charity board before, and it's very consuming, and so I can't even imagine what she did, spreading her time between so many.
Yes. Well, and that's how someone comes to pass unexpectedly at age 55.
Yeah.
And so continuing to spread our family too thin would not have been kind of teaching that lesson as well. Right. That, you have to, I know you talk about this all the time. You must fill your own cup, right, if you are going to fill everybody else's life.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially, right now, while we're in this place in our country, it's so important that we take those extra steps and really take care of ourselves right now, so that we are good for others, and we do have the ability to share just a little bit. So well, this has been pretty special. I appreciate you, Sam.
Oh, thank you. Love talking with you always.
Yeah, I always love talking with you too. Was it just last year? Was that the first time that we were ever together?
Last summer, I was in Dallas. Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? It seems like
Yes.
I've known you forever. I
It
mean,
is crazy.
you definitely have, like soul sister connections, all over the place.
Yes.
But it's just interesting how our lives have kind of always kind of gone like this. And I'll always call you when I have an idea, and you call me when you have an idea. And so I love that. I've surrounded myself with a lot of really amazing, powerful women who are just really these incredible contributors to the world. And they really help women stop and think and remember who they are, because it can be a midlife crisis or it can be a midlife becoming. And, and it's the choice is yours, right?
Well, you haven't dropped any F-bombs while we've been online today, but
I
I think
haven't.
I which kind of surprised me, but I think the difference between a midlife crisis and a midlife becoming is giving up those fucks.
Exactly.
You can become if you find that place to be just out of fucks to give, you
Exactly.
know.
Toss them in that bucket.
Yes.
I love you.
Oh, I
Thanks for
think I'm
coming on.
actually going to craft one of those in my free time right now. I'm going to find a little waste basket and I'm going to paint it. It's going to call it the fuck it bucket. That's awesome.
Bucket. That's right. All right. Thanks, love. I appreciate you.
Take care, darling.
Have a beautiful rest of your day.
You too, honey.